There have been no policy changes at Nintendo of America. That has been the cope over the past couple of weeks that Nintendo is censoring our games. If you look on the eShop, if you look at everything else that's coming out recently, when you really look and see, do a little bit of detective work, isn't it kind of odd how the only company that seems to have these issues seems to be these incredibly niche, fringe, weeaboo nonsense? Developers like, say, the guys behind Master Detective Raincode did not have any issues producing some of the most sexualized games ever last year. So you're telling me over the past several months, Nintendo has suddenly decided to censor games out of the blue, and not their own games, third party games. Like, are you really believing this? Like, do you really believe this is true? When you really look into the situation and see at how things don't add up, about how certain games aren't affected, but other ones are. It's almost like it's all a gigantic lie and has no basis in reality. There is nothing going on behind the scenes at Nintendo. This, to me, seems like an obvious attempt from the Neptunia devs to try and gaslight people into supporting the PlayStation version of their games. And this has been a reoccurring trend for years now. Like, you always see these developers put way more effort into promoting the PlayStation version of their stuff over the Nintendo one. And this, to me, is an example of that. Releasing all these statements saying that Nintendo is censoring us when, like, they've demonstrated several times with recent releases that they don't have a problem with this kind of content. But no, like, oh, our stuff is so sexy that Nintendo can't handle it, which is a blatant lie. So when you can just go on the eShop and see more sexually charged games that have come out after Neptunia, to me, it seems pretty obvious. As with similar situations over the past several months, this is nothing but a publicity stunt. Because does this happen to more major titles? What can you name that's come out recently that's been heavily altered in the American release? What games have come out that have been censored by Nintendo? The fact that people still have to cry about Tokyo Mirage Sessions and Fire Emblem Fates, almost a decade after the fact, really shows you just how little of an issue this actually is for the company. I can point to dozens of more blatant, brazen attempts at Sony at, like, screwing over their customer base, but this simply doesn't happen with Nintendo consoles. And that needs to be understood, that the reality is so much different than what the YouTube grifters want you to believe. Right? They want Nintendo to censor games because they know that will get them a lot more views and retention than if PlayStation was censoring their games. And that's why you always see Niche Gamer or Vera Dark or whoever, like, constantly blame Nintendo for changes made to games that they really have nothing to do with. I remember back in the day, people were accusing Nintendo of censoring Dragon Quest VIII when that was, like, entirely a Square Enix thing. Like, they have no understanding of the localization process. They have no respect for it, and they really actively cry wolf so often that it's impossible to take them seriously. And I think that is a really good example. Like, they're crying wolf Every single time Nintendo releases a new game, you have people crying about censorship. Fatal Frame got re-released. Oh, I bet Nintendo censored it. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 was coming out. You have a lot of people pretending that was censored when, it had a polygamy, harem ending. Like, you look at stuff like No More Heroes, like you see all this stuff and you see all of these brazen accusations that Nintendo is demanding developers tone things down when in reality that just isn't the case at all. And people really need to understand this, that this thing, this second rainfall, it's just a giant joke. Like Gamergate, like Grums, like all of these grifters, all these individuals, anybody who like enables this doesn't should not be listened to at all, because I've seen them do this several times over, where they'll exaggerate, make things up, pretend that like video games are going to get ruined, guys, when that simply has no chance of happening. Again, even if Nintendo was censoring Neptunia, I wouldn't care, because I don't play games for titillation. Like, I don't need to see titties on my Nintendo Switch games. I can see them in real life. So why exactly would any of these games have any appeal for someone like me? Why exactly are people so adamant that like we need this sexy content in games? In reality, I would be much happier with getting higher quality products from these companies. The idea that this is some like major issue in the culture war, the idea that like characters have to be like sexually appealing all the time, it's a farce, right? It's completely avoiding the real issue that developers don't make good games. They have no intention of trying to make good games. And they have a deep and utter contempt for those of us who do want to play good games, right? They have a contempt for the greatest game developer in the industry, Nintendo. And this is something we've been seeing like over and over and over again for the past several years, but there is this very deep unwillingness from the community to acknowledge that at all. Everyone wants to pretend that Nintendo is part of the problem, but that is not and never has been the case. The way Nintendo handles their localization, it is and always has been spectacular. They are very good at what they do, and I support them wholeheartedly.